Hello, everyone. Happy Sunday. I'm coming on live to do a video teaching and message, I guess, for my YouTube channel today. So if this is your first time tuning into one of my videos and you don't know who I am, my name is Stef. I'm a psychic soul alignment coach, and what I do is I work with spiritual entrepreneurs to help them to do very deep levels of healing in order to align themselves with their greatest level of success, influence, impact, and income. I also work with non-entrepreneurial spiritual people to help them to do very deep levels of healing in order to really connect back to who they truly are and become powerful creators of their realities. So that is how I help people. Every Friday, I do a teaching on my YouTube channel that I'm guided to speak on as per my spirit guides. And this past week, I have been speaking on chakra imbalances here on my YouTube channel because that's what I was asked to speak on all week long. So I will be uploading the last video in that series today. I will be doing that after this video. So the crown chakra is what I'm going to be covering today. But I was asked a couple days ago to speak on the subject of this video today, and I'm going to do my best to bring forward the message that I was asked to bring forward and to really shine a light on this. Okay, so before we get into this subject, I want you guys to know, especially if you're new to me and you don't know who I am exactly or what I do, I'm a psychic and I'm a healer. And I really use my abilities to help people to raise their consciousness and let go of what's not serving them in order to really embody more of their divinity and to become these truly powerful, unconditionally loving divine beings. And so part of doing this work and helping humanity move forward has resulted in me stepping into my purpose in a greater way and me connecting with my spirit guides and beings of higher consciousness to really understand what I can do at this time to really support humanity in moving forward. So recently I've been having ancestor guides come forward for me. I spoke to that in my last video. I actually have a video previous to this one titled, "What is the best way to support racial equality without spiritually bypassing the Black Lives Matter movement?" So I will add that up here to the card somewhere. I also have a playlist here on my channel. It's titled "Spiritual Activism versus Spiritual Bypassing." And another video titled, "What is spiritual bypassing and how is the spiritual community letting the world down?" So with wanting to serve humanity to a much higher degree, I've been having ancestor guides come forward for me to bring forward certain messages. They've been having me speak out on the importance of raising awareness around racial inequality and really encouraging spiritual people, especially, to be more proactive in bringing down these unequal and just unfair systems that exist in the world. If that's in alignment with you, if you're feeling the call to do so, I really encourage you to look at my last video, the best way to support racial equality, to help you discern that for yourself. So, okay, this intro is a little bit long, but I just had to give you that context. They've been coming forward with certain messages. And so a couple days ago, I had a Native American ancestor guide come forward. And he had powerful messages for me to share with all of you guys today. I'm going to try not to cry in this video. But I feel like sometimes in order to bring messages forward in the way in which I'm asked to and to show up in the energy in which I am asked to show up in, sometimes I get emotional to transmit the power and the importance of that message. So if you see me getting teary-eyed or if I cry, it's only because I'm really feeling the pain and the suffering of these people that I'm being a voice for today, because they're not in the physical and they need someone to speak up for them. So this is my way of giving a voice to the voiceless and to tell their stories and to help raise awareness around the importance of us as spiritually awakened people to maybe be more proactive in this movement of bringing justice to this world and creating equality for all, and really moving humanity forward in the ways in which we all truly desire for the world to be. Okay? So, a couple days ago, when I connected with this ancestor guide, I met up with him and he told me his story, and I want to share that with all of you guys today. So, what this Native American guide explained to me is all on how white colonialism has perpetuated people's sense of loss of identity. So what do I mean by this? And excuse me for a moment. I know it's gonna have boogers and stuff come down, but that's what happens sometimes. So he explained to me his story, his journey, okay? And if you know anything about history, you know that there were these white colonizers that came to the US, they came to America, and they basically took advantage of and mistreated, abused, to a certain extent, maybe enslaved. Okay, it's not the same slavery as African slavery, but to a certain extent, yes. There were certain things done, and to the Native people of the United States. And I don't feel like this is just the US, this is indigenous people in general, because today I'm really representing indigenous people, but people of color all around, but I'm giving a voice to the indigenous. So that's Australia, that's Canada, that's the US, that's wherever there are indigenous people who have been severely mistreated, and other people of color, Black people, Latinos, everywhere else, you know, Middle Easterners, all these different people, Indians, Asians, okay? Okay, I know this video is going to be a little bit long, so you can feel free to use the settings section here on the YouTube, change your speed to whatever speed you would prefer to listen to this video in, so it's a little bit faster, because I have no idea how this video is going to unfold. But basically, what he was telling me, because he was specifically from the US, is that when the white colonizers came and they started just taking over things and really hurting people, the natives were forced to assimilate into this white man's world. They were forced to assimilate in order to survive, in order to make it. And it's this assimilation and then being forced to renounce their culture, their traditions, their spirituality, their way of dressing, so many more aspects of themselves, that because they were forced to renounce these things and to then start talking like the white man, right? Like the colonizers, their language, dressing like them, being like them, acting like them, thinking like them, because they were forced to give up who they are or who they were and to assimilate into this new way of being, this mentality. This caused this separation inside of themselves, this feeling of not knowing who they are anymore, of being really internally conflicted. And especially for the ones who were more of like the more recent generations of being colonized, so the first few generations, these people who, you know, had that first time connection with the white colonizers and went through all of those battles and were, you know, mistreated and humiliated and all these other things, these people who went through that directly and the generations right after that, they especially carried so much guilt and shame for giving up who they were, for giving up their language, their traditions, their way of dress, their music, their spirituality, everything. They carried so much guilt and shame because to them it felt like selling out. Because they just felt like there was no other way for them. They felt like their identity had been stripped and they didn't know where they belonged anymore. And they felt like they were selling out because it's what they had to do to survive. Because the people that chose to be a bit more stubborn and chose to not give in so easily, the ones that didn't want to assimilate, that held on to their identity, their culture, these people who were more adamant about staying true to themselves, these people were mistreated. They had a hard time moving up in life. They were just having such hard times moving forward in their journeys and providing for their families, taking care of their own. And they, some of them were rebellious and they just weren't having it, even though they kept getting mistreated and stuff. But then the other natives that watched this happening to these people, I think we all just want our families to be okay. I think we all want our families to be safe. I think we all want to be able to provide for our families, no matter what your skin color is or where you're from. And so the natives that observed the other ones that were being stubborn and were being mistreated, they saw that and they learned, like, okay, I guess I better get with the program and do as the white man says, because I don't want my family to go through that. I don't want to be mistreated like that. I don't want to have such a hard time moving forward in life because of that. And they felt like they sold out. And so the one that I spoke to, the ancestor that I spoke to specifically, was carrying so much guilt and shame around that because he did sell out. That's how he felt. Because when I saw him, he was dressed like a cowboy. And he even cut his hair. His hair was really short. And I don't know a whole lot about indigenous culture. I'm still learning a lot by myself. I am by no means an expert on this topic. I'm just sharing what I'm being asked to share and to share from my own experiences. But when he was showing me his hair, and he was explaining to me his story, I just felt all of the sadness, all of this heaviness, this shame that he was feeling. And I was sitting there crying because I just could feel the pain that he felt inside. And I believe in Native American culture, especially, your hair is something sacred. And he had to cut his hair short to fit in. And he felt like he sold out. And so the people like him, the native ancestor that I spoke to, they felt like in order to be liked by the white man, to be taken seriously, to be treated better, to have opportunities, they had to give up who they were. And they had to just be what the white man wanted them to be. And that is the message that he wanted me to share today, because I shared recently, I think it was in the last video that I did, on the best way to support racial equality. I talked about the posts that I had been doing on Instagram, and I'll link those down here in the comments as well for you guys to check out. But in one of those posts, I shared about how my experience, growing up in the US. I'm Peruvian. I was born here, but I was raised in the US. And at the time, in the place where I was raised, there weren't a lot of Latinos. It was mostly white people and some Black people and another Latino maybe here and there, Indian, Asian here and there, but it was mostly white people. And I grew up being around a lot of white people. I being a child of immigrants, my parents didn't live in the best neighborhoods in the beginning. And we had some challenges with Black people, which made my parents feel unsafe. And they decided to move us into a safer place, a safer neighborhood. They got a house. So we were in a predominantly white community. And I was relocated to a school that was even more white. And I just, growing up in the US, I just naturally, my environment just showed me a lot of white people everywhere, right? And the reason I'm mentioning this is because it's important to raise awareness around the systemic racism that exists all around the world. And it's so subtle that you don't even notice it. And all of this subtle racism that is existing in the world today is the byproduct of the intense racism that people like the Native Americans or the other indigenous people all over the world, or Black people or other people of color in the world experience back in the day, when it was so much more intense, it was so much more violent, it was so much more aggressive. That racism from back in the day is still very much present and alive today. It's just so subtle sometimes you don't even notice it. And so I grew up in a white man's world. I grew up in, places that were predominantly white and stuff, because those were safer, right? But why is it safer? Why are those white neighborhoods safer, right? Because the system is set up for, and no offense to white people, any white person watching, if you know me at all, I'm not trying to shame any white people. I'm not trying to guilt them. I'm not trying to blame them. I'm trying to raise awareness here, because the only way for these things to change is for all of us to come together and to have these difficult conversations and to be willing to listen to one another's experiences and to put this out on the table, shine a light on it, and do something about it together. That is my intention with all of these videos, is to create more love and unity rather than further separation. So the system has been rigged for people of color to be in certain neighborhoods and to have certain challenges, which cause them to be more prone to taking part in aggression and crimes and all this other stuff. While the white people have been kind of separated from that. I'm not saying there's not any white people living in these kinds of environments or situations, but over the years, because there was all this separation, especially with the natives back in the day, they were on their reservations, right? And they're even still today on reservations. And I don't know a whole lot about the history, as I said. I don't know exactly why that started, I guess to give back to them part of what they had lost, what had been taken from them. I don't know, but a lot of times the things that I hear about reservations and the Native community is there's pain there. There's challenges that are very predominant in those communities. And so anyway, back in the day, all of these people, like, here are the Black people, here are the natives, here are these, like, they have been intentionally pushed away. And at the same time, all of us people of color have also, in a sense, wanted to stay away for our own safety from the white people, so we wouldn't get mistreated. We were pushed away, but we also wanted to stick around with people like us. But again, because of how the system was set up, how we earned a lot less for the same amount of work or more, how we have been easily profiled for crimes and so on, like our neighborhoods predominantly have a lot of challenges. So I just want to say that because I don't know all the facts, the histories, things. That is just my knowledge. And so this is why white neighborhoods are safer, right? Okay, so with that being said, you know, my family trying to do the right thing put me around more whiteness, basically. And I grew up going to school, seeing mostly white people on TV, white people was my world. And long story short, and I'm just recapping the story that I did on Instagram on my caption. There came a time when I was in middle school. I was probably in 7th grade, maybe about like 12 years old. And by that time, I didn't really speak Spanish very much. And one year in that school year, like one moment there in the year, all of a sudden, all of these immigrant children from Latin America came to my school. And it was my first time really being exposed to Spanish-speaking kids, because the Latinos that I did know at school, and there was just like a few, not so many, but the Latinos that I did know only spoke English. So all of a sudden, this like huge group, more than 10 kids from Latin America that had just arrived, came to school. They only knew Spanish. And I remember being very triggered by them because I thought they were weird. I thought they were strange. I was like, oh, what is going on here? You know, and I wanted to stay away from them for whatever reasons. At the time, like I didn't understand it then. And looking back on it, I see now, you know, when I was a little bit older, I could recognize why. But I was, in a sense, being kind of, I don't know, I guess racist towards them or discriminatory, because I felt like, oh, they don't speak English. I'm not going to talk to them. And I hope they don't try to talk to me because I don't speak English. I don't speak Spanish. So I didn't want anything to do with them. And I remember just being very frustrated with these people. And it was really interesting for me to have that realization years later to really understand why I was so frustrated with them, and the fact that I had so much resistance to these people because they didn't speak English. But why was that such a big deal? It was because I had been indoctrinated into a culture in the US where it wasn't accepting of people who were of other cultures or who were different from what, you know, Americans were supposed to be like. Because even though the US is supposedly a melting pot of all of these different nationalities and people and things and cuisines and all that jazz, yes, there's people from all over the world in the US, but is that all welcomed with open arms? Is that all accepted? You know, a lot of times in the media, you see people say, this is America, we speak English here. And you hear that from white people as well as from Black people. In fact, yesterday I was talking to an Indian American friend whose father was harassed by Black people who told her Indian father, this is America, speak English here, right? And so these Black people, myself, so many others, we have been put into a system where, you know, we have been subliminally, I guess, or cleverly brainwashed into believing that we are supposed to be like this and not be who we are, to not accept our own culture ourselves. Because especially when your family comes from another background, like my family, Peruvian, or you are a mixed kid or whatever it is, right? You can have these identity crises, you know? You can be conflicted inside of yourself to try to understand, like, who are you? Are you this or are you that? Like, where do you fit on the spectrum? Because that's what we try to figure out, is who we are. And so in the US, all of this white colonialism that happened, and just not even in the US, but everywhere in the world, there was white colonialism from Europe, from the UK, US, like all these people, they colonized all different parts of the world, right? But this white colonialism has really contributed to people's sense of loss of identity. And with Native people, especially, it's really caused them to renounce their heritage, their culture, and to, maybe for some people, just have self-loathing, self-hate, or to feel like they just don't fit in the world. They don't belong anywhere. They're not accepted. And this is painful. This is really painful because I spent most of my life not knowing where I belonged. Growing up in the US, till the time I was about 14, I felt American. I knew it was Peruvian, but I felt American. That's where I was raised. That's what I knew. And then when I was 14 and I was made aware that I was in the country undocumented, I didn't know where I fit in anymore. Because technically I was only Peruvian, but I didn't feel Peruvian. And then when I came back to Peru, I was around people that looked like me, but I didn't feel like I fit here at all. Sometimes immigrant parents, especially in different countries, don't raise their children with their culture because they want their children to assimilate into the culture that they're in order to have a better life, in order to speak the language of that country properly, in order to be accepted, whatever it is. And we don't get to, we miss that part of ourselves. We're not, it's like, how do I explain it? It kind of feels like for adopted people who are adopted by families, but then they're never able to find their biological parents, and maybe they want to find them, but they can never find them because those records are missing. And it leaves them with a sense of loss. This feeling of what could have been. This feeling of maybe not fully being grounded on some level because there's just this piece missing from inside of you. And what I'm feeling called right now to share is how this influenced my family, because I'm not Native American, but this white colonialism or this European colonialism affected my family as well. So what do I mean by that? I'm Peruvian, as I said. So the Spanish conquered Latin America, right? And my grandmother is from the highlands here in Peru. So my grandmother being from the highlands, she grew up speaking a native language called Quechua from her region. And long story short, my grandmother found herself having to come to the capital, Lima, to get work, to move forward with her life and raise her child, okay, my uncle. But my grandmother at the time only spoke Quechua, and here in the capital, they spoke Spanish. And so she experienced so much humiliation because she didn't speak Spanish. And in order to move forward here, she had to start learning it, which, anytime you move to any country, I think it's only respectable to learn the language of that area or that country that you live in. So that's understandable. But even when my grandmother learned Spanish, because she had a different accent, she didn't sound like how a person who speaks Spanish normally sounds. She had that Highlander accent to her. And she was made fun of. She was picked on. She was looked down upon because the Spanish-speaking people here, right, they looked at her for being a Highlander and an indigenous person as less than. They were superior. That's that colonial mentality of I'm superior, I'm better than you, I'm educated, and you're some kind of ignorant beast or savage, and you're below me. And so my grandmother experienced these kinds of interactions with people. And as a result, my grandmother started polishing her Spanish, trying to speak it better. And she stopped speaking her native language. And, you know, my grandmother never taught any of her children, my aunts and uncles, my mom, she never taught any of them this native language. And I love languages. I speak a few languages and I love them. I love learning because I've understood through learning languages how my world expands, because I'm able to learn about cultures and music and talk to the people and have a different experience. It's a totally different experience going somewhere and actually knowing the language and interacting with people, as opposed to just being a tourist and not speaking the language. Like, you just see the world differently by having that ability to communicate in that language. And for me, in a sense, I feel like that was robbed from me. That part of me that is connected here to my ancestors, to Peru, more powerfully, because I wasn't taught that language. My grandmother, it just ended with her. And that's what I mean. You know, this kind of thing has happened all over the world. And there are so many people that haven't been able to really connect back to their roots. You know, I'm location independent, and between last year and this year, I was in Colombia for 4 months. And I remember one day very clearly, one night in Cartagena, Colombia, I was walking by this place where they were having some kind of fashion show, and there were these children putting up a kind of like a play or enactment or something, reenactment of Black Panther. And it was these beautiful Black Colombian children, or Afro-Colombian children. They were so beautiful with the face paint and the clothes, and they were trying to really put on a performance like in Black Panther and stuff, and doing all these dances and all that stuff. And I remember very clearly looking at one boy in particular, because he looked African. He didn't look like Latino, like Black Latino, like he had been mixed. I'm sure he probably was, but he had distinct features that made him look more African. And he had all this face paint on, and he just was beautiful. And I remember looking at him and just becoming so sad, because on the outside, he looks African. He's Black, but he doesn't know his culture. He doesn't know his heritage. He doesn't probably know where his people come from. He doesn't know the history behind that. He's missing a part of himself. And he's never going to maybe experience what that is. And it really moved me, it really impacted me to see that, how all of this has robbed us in some kind of way. Now, me, with my particular beliefs, being an Aquarius who's all about spirituality and higher consciousness type stuff and conspiracy theories and all these kinds of things, you know, I have never been one to be about the cultural type stuff. I have, you know, shamanic energy inside of me. I do shaman type work, and, you know, I'm a modern day shaman. I don't necessarily do the plants and the rituals and those kinds of things, you know, and that's not my style. But there was that part of me early on in my in my journey now, I see that I kind of rejected all of that tradition and the culture because, my Aquarius brain and stuff is like, I'm not from this planet anyway. I don't care about this or whatever. And I would just kind of want to disconnect from this world, right? But we're here on this planet. We're here to have this human experience. We're here to learn to be good with being here on Earth, even though maybe our souls are not from here. They don't originate from here. Learning to be comfortable being in this human bodysuit. And as I've become more comfortable with that, as I've healed through a lot of things to really accept my existence here on Earth, I really see the importance of having these connections to have a deeper understanding of ourselves, of others, of wanting to be here. It just gives you another depth that I can't even really explain until you actually go through that process. See, in the past, okay, and this kind of has to do with spiritual bypassing and spiritual ego, which maybe at some point I will do a video specifically on spiritual ego. But sometimes when you're on the spiritual path, you think that you're better than people because you think you're so woke. And there was a time that I kind of scoffed at all of this cultural stuff and the religions and the things. And I thought, like, none of this matters anyway. Like, this is all crap and whatever. I had these beliefs, right? I was young, arrogant, just a lot of things, right? It's just part of the journey. And there are some people that don't believe in cultures and all these different things because they feel like cultures and language and tradition and stuff separates people, because it does to a certain extent, right? We're saying you are from here, you do these things. You are from here, you do these things. We categorize. And to a certain extent, it does separate people, okay? And that's why some spiritual people reject that, like I did. I was just like, I can't be bothered with all this traditional shaman type stuff. Like, that's not for me, blah, 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 all these things. But as I've gone on my journey, I've healed, I've expanded my heart more, I've opened up my level of understanding, my consciousness to a greater degree. I understand the beauty in all of that and the oneness in all of that, and how honoring these things actually promotes more unity. And so what do I mean by that is with cultures, for example, instead of completely rejecting all of these cultures, all of these traditions, these heritages, and all that kind of stuff, if we could take the time to learn about these things and to take interest, curiosity around them, and accept people and what they have to bring forward to the table, we can then become more integrated in that instead of continuing to separate, right? When we take that time to be like, oh, what do people from your part of the world do? What language do they speak? What do they eat? How do they dance? What kind of music is that? And we take that interest, we can then kind of blend together in the same way that, a family with two cultures can blend together. Maybe you have, in my case, my family is Peruvian, but the majority of the women in my family in the US are now with Mexican men. So we're blending these two cultures together rather than continuing to just be only like Peruvian or only Mexican or, only Indian, only Asian. We're blending through these interracial marriages or whatever, and coming together and understanding one another and being more accepting of that, embracing it, allowing it to be beautiful, allowing all of it to be okay and to form part of us, right? And so the same thing comes with these different languages and cultures. When we take the time to be interested in that, to learn more, because we're genuinely interested, we open our hearts to that. And we start maybe adopting some things. We start taking part in people's maybe festivities or whatever it is, right? We allow that to form part of us, and we can come back to that oneness. So this is the thing, is that right now, the ancestors are coming forward because there's a lot of ancestral healing that needs to happen. For so many centuries, and who knows, how many thousands of years actually, there has been a lot of abuse and mistreatment and separation. And it's caused people to disconnect from who they truly are. It's caused people from not knowing who they are. Sometimes we need to connect back to our roots, to remember more of who we truly are, to have this deeper sense of identity, to feel like we have a place here in the world. And people have been robbed of that in so many different ways around the world. People of color, indigenous people, Black people. And it's time to heal that. It's time to shine a light on that so people can start reconnecting with their roots, embracing themselves more deeply, and understanding that they're going to be loved and accepted by embracing more of who they truly are, their heritage. See, right now with karma, karma replays itself out again and again until it gets healed. And there's just so much ancestral karma there for the indigenous community, for rejecting, being forced to reject their ways, their customs, their spirituality, their heritage, all these different things. They have had to reject that and renounce that, and that has stayed in the energy. It has stayed in the energy, and it's time for that to be healed and released. And the only way for that to happen is by allowing these people to come back to their roots, allowing them to embrace that part of themselves, to allow them to start being more of that and feel safe being like that. And for us to accept them and to not reject it, to not push it away again, to not try to have them assimilate to our way of being or doing things. Instead of assimilating, we need to learn how to integrate. We need to learn to accept one another and our differences, and to see the beauty in all of that, and to allow that to blend. That is the message that I was asked to bring forward today. There's so many people right now who have this sense of loss of identity. They don't know who they are. They don't fit in. They're disconnected from who they truly are. That's why they don't know where they fit in, who they're supposed to be. And this has affected us in so many different ways. And right now with the Black Lives Matter movement, it's affecting so many of us in different ways. I recently spoke to a friend who is Asian Canadian, and all of her life she felt Canadian. She doesn't speak her family's mother tongue. And right now, because of the coronavirus situation, there have been attacks on the Asian community because this started in Wuhan. And according to the news, it started there. And so the Asian community has been under attack, and there's been mean, hurtful things said about Asians. And obviously, as an Asian Canadian, this impacts them, because even though they feel and they have felt Canadian all of their lives, they're still very much aware that they're Asian, right? And so now that their Asianness or their Asian community is being attacked, it's impacted them. And now they don't know where they belong. Are they Asian? Are they Canadian? What's going on here, right? Because they're not so connected to their Asian culture because they've assimilated into Canadian culture, which according to them as well, because I'm not Canadian, but according to them, Canadian culture, they pride themselves on being a melting pot of cultures and things, but it's not really that way in reality, because there's still a lot of segregation or discrimination or separation over there on many different levels, and it's subtle. But, now they have a sense of loss of identity, because who are they now? Now that their Asianness is being attacked and they no longer fit into the Canadian box, right? They weren't made to feel growing up that it was safe and acceptable to be Asian. In, school, we're not taught to be, at least when I went to school, from what I can remember, I don't really remember us being taught to be super accepting and curious about other cultures and things and embracing our differences. It was more so of, this is how the educational system goes, this is what you're supposed to learn, and that's it. And you get a little dash of history there and a little dash of culture there, and that's it. The education system, the way that the systems in the world are created, have so much racism in them, are set up in a way to not allow us to really integrate and come together. And as I shared in my last video, it's time to be more proactive. It's time to really do something to change this. If you're a teacher watching this, or of some kind of educator that you can talk to that would be open to watching this video, or you yourself are a parent or something, what you can do to start changing the racism happening in the world is being proactive in your school, talking to the directors, the teachers, whoever, to try to shift the, syllabus or something in the school, in the education of your child, to be more inclusive of other children, to educate our children to being more comfortable with people of different backgrounds, and explaining to them, why everyone has, different language or different dances or form of dressing or whatever, and how that's all beautiful and acceptable, and really allowing the children to start becoming comfortable with this, and making sure that your schools are diverse, that they're not just predominantly one color or type of people, allowing them to become diverse, really using your voice to ask for these kinds of changes, rising up and doing something about that, creating, a community or a committee or whatever with other fellow parents to talk about this. Because as a child, I was 12 years old. My parents didn't necessarily fill me with racism. They didn't tell me, yeah, you should treat people this way or that way or whatever. And I wasn't taught that at school. I didn't have those interactions. And I didn't watch TV that was giving me that message. But somehow, in my 12-year-old mind, I had already this desire or this unconscious programming to be discriminatory towards only Spanish-speaking individuals. And I rejected that. And why was that? That was because in my environment, I was just around mostly white people, and we only spoke English, and nobody ever made me feel safe to, speak Spanish, or to want to really share about my culture, or to want to learn about my own culture, preserve my culture, or any of that stuff. I just assimilated, and that's what I did, and that's what I expected. That's what I thought I was supposed to be. That's what I thought everyone was supposed to be. And if people weren't like that, then something was wrong with them. They were a problem. And that is what my behavior as a child demonstrated towards these other children. And that's the kind of world that exists all around us. You don't get this maybe, but if your children are white and you send them to an only white school, your children unconsciously, are being programmed to think that white is the norm, that it's only good to be around white people. If they watch shows where there's only white people all the time, then that's their world. And unconsciously, when they connect with people of a different color, that might throw them off. They might have unconscious bias happening there that makes them maybe not feel as comfortable around people of color, because their world day in and day out is all around white people only, white people only. And if you don't use your voice as a parent to speak up and to request that there is more diversity in your schools, in certain programs, in the lessons that your teachers are giving your children and so on, if you're not requesting that, then your children are being indoctrinated into this system where they are being molded and viewing the world a certain way and expecting that from the world. And then anything that defies that is a problem, is an issue, is maybe threatening or scary or whatever it is. And that's why we need to come together and use our voices to say something about that, to try to change those things so that children like me and my friend, we don't have that issue with our identity complex anymore, wondering like, who am I now? Where do I fit? Or people aren't robbed of their heritage. They're able to feel whole and complete inside of themselves because they know this history, this background. Because even though we're infinite beings and we live, many lifetimes and all this other stuff, the point is that the more that you sometimes access these parts of your history, you're able to realize yourself in a greater way and step into your power in a greater way because you know more of who you truly are. It's important to a certain extent to know these things about yourself, to allow yourself to move forward, to find your place in the world, to feel like you belong here, to maybe fulfill your purpose even. And when you're not given that opportunity because you're put into a system that robs you of that, then you aren't able to really fulfill your purpose, step into your power, feel like you belong here, and you feel then hopeless because you don't fit anywhere. So this is what I was asked to bring forward today, and I really hope that this has helped anyone who listened to it, that this has really opened anyone's eyes that maybe needed to hear these perspectives, needed to hear these stories, these experiences. The only way for the world to really change is if we all rise up together and we bring forward this shift collectively, and we really understand the importance of this. So that's all I wanted to say today. I did write down something, but I guess what I want to mention, okay, because I took a note here, is this is not just about white colonialism, although this was the focus of this video. There are other parts in the world where people of color, as in browner people or people with more melanin, are not easily accepted, or they're not able to integrate because the places where they find themselves are homogeneous, I think is a word, or homogenous. And so it's difficult. And by that, what I mean is like Asia, like certain places in Asia are a bit of a challenge for some people of color to integrate into, because some places in Asia are homogenous and the people look a certain way and that's their norm and that's their standard, and anything that kind of challenges that is sometimes not acceptable. Obviously, this isn't true for everyone. This isn't true for all Asian people. This isn't true for all white people. But the mentality is like, if you don't look like us, then you're not one of us and you can't assimilate, and they keep you away, right? There's a lot of mixed Asian children in the world that don't feel like they belong in Asia, or they're in Asian in that sense, because they don't look like the stereotypical Asian person from that area, and they have a loss of identity because that other part of themselves that makes them brown a lot of times, or some, of a different ethnicity, isn't accepted. So they don't have a clear sense of who they are. And this doesn't really allow for them to really show up as their true powerful selves, right? So this is something that we all need to work on in order to bring that down and be more loving and accepting of one another, and to really help people to connect back to their true power, to really help people to connect back to who they truly are, so that they can truly realize their full potential by knowing exactly who they are. You know, when you know who you are, you're able to really just direct your life in the direction you want to go in, because you know exactly who you are and what you're about. And it's like the starting point that you are on a map. And then from that starting point, you're able to really move in whatever direction you want to go in. But if you don't know who you are, then you're just not able to really go anywhere, because you don't know where you're starting from. So I really hope that this message has really helped you in some kind of way. I would love to hear from you in the comments below what your thoughts are on this subject, what your experiences have been. If you are a person who has been struggling with your sense of identity, if you feel like your identity was stripped in some kind of way because of where you were raised, or you felt like, you know, who you were, your heritage, your culture wasn't accepted, and you had to kind of renounce that part of you in order to integrate, in order to be accepted, in order to assimilate, I would love to hear from you in the comments below. I really feel like it's really important for us to have this dialogue, to connect with one another, to really see that people are truly suffering from this. Because the only way for us to really connect with one another, to come back to oneness, is by empathizing for one another, having compassion and understanding for one another, and hearing our stories. And when we don't share these things, you know, we're not able to really exercise that empathy, that compassion, that understanding. I really want those of you who maybe aren't aware of how serious this problem is, or how much this kind of issue really impacts people, to read through people's stories, to hear their perspectives, hear their experiences, to really see how this is a major problem, and that we all need to do something together to change that, to fix that, so that people don't keep suffering in this way, and they can give themselves permission to be who they truly are. They can reconnect to their roots. They can really start proudly being themselves. That's really important. The more people that connect to who they truly are, and they become their authentic selves, they shine their light, the more people are able to raise their vibration, you know, raise their consciousness, anchor in more love and light here to the planet, because they're being more of their true authentic self. And so if we want to make this world a better place, we have to help people to be more of their true authentic selves. And how we do that is by being proactive and helping, you know, use our voices to request these shifts in our society, in our educational systems, in our communities, and all these different ways, so that we're more accepting of our differences, you know, our ethnic, cultural differences, and allowing that to all be okay, so that we can then blend, we can integrate, and people can really just anchor in the beautiful light and energy of who they truly are here. And then we're gonna together light up this world. That is my message for you guys today. I really hope that this has helped you. If you enjoyed this video, please give this video a thumbs up, a like wherever you're watching from. Feel free to share this message out to whoever you feel maybe needs to hear it, who would benefit from it. I would love to hear from you in the comments below. Subscribe to my channel if you want to see more of these messages, because I feel more ancestor guides are going to be coming forward, asking me to speak on different topics to raise awareness. The only way for us to create a new earth is for us to each do our part in taking some kind of action to create that new earth. It's not just about meditating on it or visualizing on it only. You know, we're here as physical beings. We need to take a certain level of physical action in some way, whether it's outward or inward action or whatever it is, but some kind of action needs to be taken. And so the ancestors are having me speak out on different topics that I need to speak out on, to help raise awareness, to help people expand their consciousness, their understanding, their perspective on certain things, and for all of us to just move forward together and try to do our best to come together to anchor in more love on this planet and in ourselves and with one another. So that is my message today. I really appreciate you guys. for watching, especially if you stuck around with me till the very end. Thank you so much for your time. Your time really does mean so much to me. I really love and appreciate all of you. I'm grateful for all of you who are, following me on this channel and who appreciate my work, and I really hope that it does benefit you on your journey. And I will see you in the next video. Take care, everyone. Bye.